we are live on Facebook, so you can go ahead and share it if you see it on my timeline. And then I'll be reading the comments from here. So, okay. Welcome to today. Hi, Tiffany. Welcome to today's discussion. Let's talk about it. Where we're just having a conversation about domestic violence and the reality of the reality of domestic violence, because there's a real there's more to it than what people really know, or more to it of what people really talk about or are willing to address, or even willing to acknowledge, whether if it's themselves or it's the people that they know that's going through it. So as an organization, if you have seen our previous videos, you'll like to see that we like touching on topics that it would basically would be considered taboo. But I like to have those conversations because I like to shine light and give people who don't talk about it a chance to see that there are people in this world who've gone through it, been through it, silently lived through it, and continue to prosper in life. And there are people who are going through it and don't know how to get out, don't know who to talk to, don't even know where to start. And for the most part, a lot of people go through domestic violence without even knowing that they're in a domestically abusive situation. So that is the main purposes of today's conversation. We are very open. Anyone who's given feedback or have anything to chime in, feel free. If you're on the Zoom with us, the chat is open. But we won't be expressing any names, as just to respect everyone's privacy. Anyone who's joining us on Facebook, the state that it still goes the same way, that we won't be sharing anyone's name or who said what, and just basically to respect everyone's privacy. So I'm Camilla Williams. I am the executive director of It's My Movement, where we are helping people break the cycle of trauma. Specifically, we deal with sexual abuse and domestic violence and substance and alcohol abuse and recovery. We're just all about, conquering trauma. So today you have these beautiful faces that's joined with us today, who are the panelists of this conversation, because just like I said, we do like to have conversations that can be triggering, that is very taboo. However, we have licensed professionals with us, so we can gather that so we can all have this conversation and get the direct and most needed support that we need through having this conversation. I'm as transparent as possible. I speak to all transparency. And so we have Jaquetta, who is a licensed professional counselor. She also have her own practice in the Arizona and Michigan area. She specializes in trauma, everything thereof. I don't really want to speak for you, but I know you are a jack of many trades when it comes to mental health and providing the different services that's necessary for trauma. And we also have Joella Smith, who is also a licensed social worker, and she is one of our mental health therapists with the organization. And we also have other domestic violence survivors who are joining us and joining the conversation. And we're just gonna dive into it. During this 2-hour ordeal, we'll be going over 5 topics that we feel as though is primarily important when it comes to domestic violence and how we plan to address it. So starting with that, we'll go with Joella and what's domestic violence and the signs of domestic violence.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm wearing purple, as you see, because that's the color for domestic violence. And October is Domestic Violence Month, so I'm glad you kind of put this together so we can eventually share it, get it out to clients. That way they have that kind of support system in place. So domestic violence, where do we start? So it's willful intimidation, it's physical assault, battery, sexual assault, other abuses, verbal assaults, verbal abuse. It's part of a pattern of power and control that the perpetrator often portrays and puts on their significant partner. It can be threats, it can be economic at times, of course, the violence, the physical violence, and it can also be psychological. So there's a lot of psychological abuse that we'll be talking about. And again, it's definitely an open conversation about how it has affected us psychologically in regard to mental health. But really, domestic violence is something that doesn't have a face. Like it can impact one, any gender, any sexual orientation, any race. Like it can affect anyone, and it's something that is so taboo, especially in certain cultures and certain traditions. And we're really just now starting to see a shift, and where people are very open to talking about it, where they're owning the fact that they're a victim, and even abandoning the word victim and becoming a survivor. So I'm glad we're talking about this now because again, domestic violence affects 1 in 4 women. So even us now, one of us has experienced domestic violence to an extent, and the consequences can be felt intergenerationally, which we'll talk about as well. But really, domestic violence is just one person trying to take that power and take that control, whether that's through intimidation, whether that's through threats, whether that means, so many of the other signs that we'll talk about. And again, because of that power and control dynamics associated with domestic violence, a lot of victims, one, don't see themselves as victims, and two, they do not seek help because why? What's going to happen? They might really, really need that person. And that's where the power and the control dynamics can continue to be perpetuated, especially when, financial means are involved, or if there's kids involved, so on and so forth. It can also involve stalking. A lot of people don't even hear that as a form of domestic violence, but it can be. Sexual coercion, which we'll talk about as well, as we discuss our various experiences. But yeah, all of that stuff can traumatize a person. So domestic violence, or now, IPV, you might hear them call it, intimate partner violence, is becoming so prevalent, and awareness is needed to talk about it. So, yeah, and I know I'm talking to like a lot of survivors now, and I'm gonna open the floor because, we think we know the red flags, but in the time and the moment when we're there, they're like yellow, maybe. So
a little bit orange.
Yes. So we never know when really we're in a domestic violence situation until it escalates to physical violence, which often is the case. It's not something that just kind of happens one day. It's usually a gradual progression of insults and demeaning gestures, and which will eventually lead to that physical violence.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You guys tell me, like, what were some warning signs if I am speaking with survivors that you guys see? The typical, red flags.
I would say the typical red flags that I see are someone who's manipulative and someone who checks all the boxes for a narcissist, which Joella will go into in a little bit. But I'm going back to what you said about physical abuse, that a lot of people don't realize that when you're experiencing mental and emotional abuse, that even though it's not physical, it's still abuse. And some people would take an apology as, oh, maybe I didn't mean, maybe he didn't mean it, or maybe she didn't, whatever, or maybe she's having a bad day, until it escalates, or until the person is just really saying words that you just can't take back. And we have people who make pros and cons lists. And I tell people all the time that although you make a pro and cons list, and that pros may be on 12, but that 1 or 2 con may be huge over those 12 pros, you know? So
Mhm.
those are one of the
Yeah.
signs. What about you ladies? Let me know.
I think in situations like that, I think a lot of times especially when you have someone that may be new to a relationship or maybe inexperienced, there are cycles to abuse. And so what happens is they come in and they're very charismatic, charming. They check all the boxes. I mean, we already talked, well, one of the topics that we're going to discuss is narcissism. And we know that narcissists have the tendency to mirror you. And so what people don't understand is essentially what happens when they meet these individuals, they fall in love with themselves because they tend to mirror the qualities that that individual have. And so what happens is they go in initially like, oh my God, this person checked all the boxes. They they're my soulmate. It's something about this person.
Mhm.
And what it is essentially they're falling in love with themselves. And so what happens is once they feel that they have their hooks in this individual, they start the devaluation when they can't get things their way. When you start to, see like little signs and say, wait a minute. Now I know when we first met, we said that we liked this television show and you watch this all the time, but you don't know none of the characters. So was that true? So
Yeah.
it's like what they do is they find things that connects you. And so they say, I'm interested in that as well. So now you're thinking like, I have this person that loves and enjoys everything that I tend to like and enjoy. So we can make a great life together. And so the devaluation starts to happen, and once the devaluation start to happen, now this person is chasing that honeymoon phase, that feeling of love and admiration and all the love bombing that came along with, meeting this individual initially. And so that is usually why a person tends to stay in that situation for so long, because they feel like that person has potential. It was there initially, so it's in there, and what people don't understand is no, it's you that you fell in love with, not that individual. And what a person with narcissistic personality disorder tend to do is they tend to go through the motions of love bombing, devaluation. And while you're in that evaluation phase, you're no longer the quote unquote primary source. So now what they're doing is they're love bombing someone else while you're on the shelf. And it's the same cycle with that individual. And when they start devaluing them, they either hoovering you to try to figure out what you're doing because you might have something that they need at that particular moment, or they love bombing somebody else. So they tend to cycle around with the same individuals to get the things that they want. And they're very malignant, they're very cunning. And not only that, it depends. There's so many different characteristics and there's so many different types. So we have, of course, I'm sorry, I'm getting all into it, but we have, of course, the overt narcissist. And, no offense to anybody, but the overt narcissists, in my opinion, tend to, I'll give an example of Donald Trump or Kanye West, the people that are overtly, out there with it, and they don't have the capacity to kind of sugarcoat or minimize. The cerebral, the people that use their intellect, the somatics, they use their bodies and sex appeal to attract individuals. And then we have the malignant, the covert, the people that can sit and hide, for years before they come out and really destroy. And by the time you really understand what you got yourself into, you battered and bruised, and it's difficult for you to kind of get yourself out of that situation. So it's subtle. The abuse is very subtle when you're dealing with the covert, and that's what makes it more dangerous than the other types, because you don't see it coming. You don't see it until you actually have been drugged through the mud in
A couple
a
of
sense.
things. Can
Yeah.
you touch on what love bombing is?
So love bombing is, I mean, it's when you meet an individual and they come in and they tell you all the right things. They So I always tell people, you try the fruit, buy the fruit. You watch the fruit that people bear. People will come into a relationship and they'll sell you a dream. They'll tell you they're doing X, Y, and Z when they ain't really doing, as much as they appear. And we know that narcissists tend to have a mentality or traits of grandiosity. So what they do is they make things appear to be bigger than what it is. So if they don't have the things to back it up, then that's a clear indication. And we have to understand too, a lot of narcissists tend to hold high positions, CEOs and so forth. So they may have the things to back it up, but do they have the empathy and the compassion? And so what happens is they come in, they buy you things, they sell you a dream. They, like I say, they mirror you. If you say, "Oh, I love jazz music," they're going to take you to jazz concerts. They're going to do whatever they need to do to get you to say, or to get you to, um, you know, to go along with whatever they want or need from you. And what people don't understand is narcissists are incapable of having empathy for other people. And so they may show quote unquote concern and care initially, but for the most part, it's all an act. And so there are certain characteristics you have to watch for. The need for admiration, lack of empathy and insight,
Extreme
constant,
jealousy.
yes, definitely, constant need for praise, the belief that they're special and deserving of special treatment, um, coercive, I can never say that word, coercive and manipulative behaviors, the tendency to maybe bully other people into um, getting on board with the things that they feel should be, in a sense. So love bombing is just the initial phase of a relationship with the individual where they're putting out all, they throwing out all the stops or trying to get you um to adhere to whatever they want or need at that particular time. So
Yeah.
if you love God and church, they gonna preach the Bible to you, so they gonna tell you whatever you want to hear. And so, like I said, you really have to watch people. And I always tell people, when you get into a relationship, the first thing that people want to do is, of course, they want to get to know that individual. And so what they tend to do is they tend to talk about their past and talk about certain relationships and the things that they went through that was traumatic for them. And that, to me, in my opinion, too early can be extremely dangerous, because those are the things that the narcissists tend to feed upon, and they use it for their advantage. And so the very thing that you told them that hurt you is what they tend to use against you. If you have a love for your family and your parents, then what they tend to do is they'll start isolating you from the people that you love and your supports. So you just have to really be careful of the people that you encounter. It's okay to interact and mix and mingle with people, but don't divulge too much personal information too soon.
That's a good.
Yeah.
I like
And
all
watch
that.
out. I love how you said too that oftentimes in these situations, people are chasing that honeymoon stage, because oftentimes that's what perpetuates that, and love bombing perpetuates that abuse, because then now in their validation, they say, "Oh, that person can get back to being that
Exactly.
person for me," which really was what you were just saying, was just a facade. But it
Right.
also causes us to ignore those warning signs, the jealousy, the lack of decision making. When you start seeing someone start to kind of control your finances or make these decisions and kind of insult you in doing so, insulting your parenting, destroying your belongings, like these are like the small stuff that, like, again, they're able to love bomb afterwards, and then they're like, all right, yeah, they just threw all my clothes out the window, but
It's the destruction
came up with
part.
roses. So
So
yeah.
anybody else, like, with any signs that they have encountered that allow them to know that this person may be a red flag?
I think jealousy was the one for me. Jealousy at the beginning, where I was like, oh, he likes me. It's cool. He's just jealous because he doesn't want me to do too much. He likes me too much. And it's something that's easy to look over, but it's definitely a big red flag. You gotta look at that. Like, it's also a little bit of control in there, or not even a little bit. It's a lot of control, because that was it for me. You know, you just like looking at like, oh, this guy really wants to be around me. He wants to see me all the time. He wants to spend time all the time. It's like the control of your space, your energy, your time, that you don't even realize that it's going away within the moments of you giving it to that person. You know, it's jealousy. That for me was the one for once you said jealousy, I'm like, yeah. Yeah. And it's easy to love
Yeah.
bomb
And
that
it's funny
too,
you say
because
that too. Mhm.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying, you can love bomb that too, because then you're like, no, I'm not jealous. I want to see you. I want to spend time with you. You know, they can flip it real easy.
Yes, that's why the research says that in, DV relationships, that women are usually the ones that have more time constraints, meaning they're the ones not going to work because of all the stress. They're the ones being late and experiencing more of those consequences. So it's interesting you say that, because they are kind of robbing people, robbing you of your time.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people to when you, because there's times where I've been known that women tend to enter relationships and they like, it's just something about this individual, and we all know that, of course, jealousy and possessiveness is definitely a huge red flag. But what about the real charming, charismatic,
Yeah.
the somatic narcissists that use their sex appeal and their charm to win you over? And so what tends to happen with them is they're more like smothering. They like, oh, where you going? What you doing? Like, oh, I'm at Walmart. Oh, what you at Walmart? Did you see anybody there? They ask all these questions. They're like, damn, why did you ask us so many questions? Oh, I just care. I just care about you. I just want to make sure you're safe. And when you get to a point where you start to feel physical symptoms, when that person physically make you ill, or physically like agitate your soul. That's what I call agitate your soul. Then like, okay, I'm having like physical effects from this person, and I don't understand why. Pay attention to that as well, because sometimes people, like I said, can be real subtle. But if you start to feel those physiological symptoms, as far as like high anxiety, not being able to focus, feeling like you have to explain everything and so forth. But like I said, physical symptoms, then that's another red flag as well. Sometimes we don't pay attention to that. We just think like, oh, we're just anxious. No, this person is really like is really like getting to you physically.
One of my experiences with those charismatic people is that they like to wordplay.
Oh yeah.
That is another
Oh, yes.
sign and red flag for me, is people who like to wordplay, because I mean it's obviously a sense of manipulation, but I'm just probably just getting triggered with it myself, because it's actually happened to me, like to a point where you start like, am I really the crazy one? And this person will really tell you that you're crazy. Like whatever you know to be true is not actual and factual, even though that you consulted with yourself, the woman in the mirror, man in the mirror, and even sometimes even see it for your own eyes. And they'll still tell you that it's green when it's really blue.
Well, that's one of the biggest tools that
Yeah, what
narcissists
you just
use.
described is gaslighting.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Gaslighting.
that's the word.
Yeah. And we all know that gaslighting causes you to question your reality. And the purpose of gaslighting is to disarm your discernment. And that's what I always tell. Don't ever allow anything or anyone to disarm your discernment. If you feel that, something is not right, then 9 times out of 10, something is not right. Even if you don't have an idea, you always pay attention to that feeling.
Can we bring that up when we talk about getting out of it and healing? Because that's going to touch on everything. Your stomach, your intuition, how you feel, don't ever, ever, ever second guess that feeling. Because that, once you do, it's like, you how do you turn around and trust yourself after that? You know, you can't do that. I also wanted to bring up potential. Falling in love or the honeymoon stage, that's like potential. It's like you see somebody, you see the red flags and you take it for what it is because no, they're going to be better in their future, or no, they got the potential to be this person. No, they really don't. You do.
Right?
Yes.
You get exactly what
You know, you
get.
got to take people for who they really are.
Yeah.
And say, oh, I'm gonna see you in 10 years being this kind of person, or even in 6 months, this guy's gonna marry me. Like, no, you can't put that expectation on somebody else because you see the potential in them. That doesn't work.
And with even you mentioning marriage, one of the signs for me was when you first meet someone and one of their first things, let's get married. And
Exactly.
I feel
Yeah.
like I started to realize that most people who are like that usually do turn out to be narcissists who use, they think that every woman wants to be a bride, every woman wants to be married, and they will literally dangle this, oh, I'm going to marry you one day, or you should feel good for even me choosing you. Or I had this one person, that unnameless person that I'm going to bring up later, that she told me like I could have been with, we used to hang around her school friends, and she was like, I could have been with X, Y, and Z, but I'm with you, so you should feel like blah blah blah. But that was also a time that I didn't really know my worth.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
that plays a big part into, I guess, what we can kind of like dive into the next topic where we talk about childhood trauma and how it connects to domestic violence. Because just continuing on to what I just said, like at that time when I was in a relationship with this nameless person, I didn't know my worth. And she would be the one who would think that she would be able to tell me what my worth was. And it wasn't until we broke up that I actually realized that like I had to start to understand what my worth is and how worthy I am before I can allow anyone else to tell me anything about myself. And she was one of those people who learned about my trauma early on. And throughout the relationship, she would come around my family and everything. She became buddy with my family. So like when everything had came to a head, it was hard for anybody to believe that she have done the things, said the things, or treated me in a way that she has, you know. um
Yeah. Those are all actions to exert that control too. Once she gets to know your family, once you know all that starts, getting more connected, that's how she can exert, that power over you. And once, I mean, a lot of times we see too, self-disclosure too early in a relationship, it can probably be your downfall because they might pick up on insecurities you have and use that to kind of sink their teeth in and feed off
Absolutely.
that. So by
And
month like 5, you're like, oh snap, the honeymoon stage is over. But now he's treating me this certain type of way. How did he know
Yeah.
I have low
And
self-esteem or stuff
even
like
just
that?
connecting that with, I would just say my childhood trauma, like at that time, I felt a way about my family personally. And I was in my own healing process of healing wounds of things that I had about my family actively. And she was with me while I'm having these hard conversations with family members and things like that. And I would confide in her and how it made me feel because I'm on this healing journey and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to live my life angry with people who I had no choice to even being in my life. You know, I'm growing up, I'm learning more, whatever. And one time she said to me, and which I feel like most domestic violence survivors have heard before when they do get close to someone's family, that one of the first things when she said to me that for not only do she know how to kill me and get rid of my body, but the fact that she will kill me and no one, not my family, not my friends, no one will come looking for me. because I'm here. At that time, I'm originally from New Jersey, but I've been in Philly for about 8 years now. And when I was in that relationship, it was when I first came to Philly, and I was having all these type of feelings and things like that. And I genuinely believed it. I believe that if something happened to me right now, I don't talk to my family. So, well, I talk to my family now. I love my family. Shout out to my cousin over there. Hey, Gabby. But anyway, talk to my family, love my family. And, but I really believe at that time, I wasn't talking really to anyone. And I really believed at that time that it will probably take a while before someone noticed that I'm missing, you know?
And that sad reality is something that he used to his advantage. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, that's his ultimate goal. Even with narcissists, like you were saying, and these types of relationships, they want to isolate you. They want you away from all your friends. They want you away from all your family. Like, they want you to themselves. So meanwhile, you're struggling with your own isolation and not having family. He's, up in the air because, or he or she is up in the air because
you only got me, and now we're only around their friends. And
yeah, and that's why even in domestic violence relationships, the risk is so much higher if your partner has a firearm, because they instantly can use that to their advantage for that type of
violence. She had a machete, okay? And not that I didn't think that she would not or whatever use it on me, but the factor was that physically she couldn't see me there. So weapons were very relevant to her when it came to like wanting to make me feel threatened without really making me feel threatened. And it wasn't until the actual day that I left and the very last time that I saw her that the very first and last time she was ever going to have the opportunity to even attempt, because she did attempt to use that machete on me. So, but I will get into that when we start sharing experiences and things like that. But for anybody else, is there any childhood traumas that you can acknowledge that I would say connects with any type of domestic violence situation that you've gone through?
My parents used to fight regular. My parents fought. I can remember me and my brother, like it was us two. If I needed to separate us from my parents doing their thing in the living room, that was my job, And I was not old enough to understand, because I have kids now. They didn't understand when it was me and their dad. And I didn't understand it when it was my mom and my dad. I understand it now. But when you're a kid, you're not even thinking, like, you're just looking at it like, okay, my parents are arguing and they're fighting. So when it turned and the tables turned and it was my turn to go through that situation, it was plenty of times that I'm like, shit, what am I doing? I'm repeating this cycle. I'm allowing this to happen, and that played a part in why it had to stop, because of my kids, but I mean,
that's why it's so important to know and pay attention to like the characteristics. And one of the things that I like to do with the women that I treat is I teach them how to heal from narcissistic abuse, but not only just healing from narcissistic abuse, recognizing those signs, because there's signs and there's characteristics. And me growing up with a parent that has, that's narcissistic, I know all too well. I can spot them a mile away. And so what I try to do is I try to provide awareness. And what I've learned is that it's definitely a work in progress. It is it's very traumatizing, and there's a thing called learned behavior, which we all know, that we tend to gravitate towards things that's familiar to us. And so it's not uncommon for you to have a parent that display these characteristics, and then for you to enter into a relationship with a person that has those characteristics, because that's what's familiar. But when you recognize, like, okay, these are characteristics that I'm all too familiar with, and I don't want to go down that road. I don't want my children to go down that road. So what you have to do at this point is you have to make a conscious effort to educate yourself. We know that narcissists there's a lot of different characteristics. The conversation we know is always about them. They feel uncomfortable focusing on others. People love them. They expect others to put their needs before their own needs. They're always right. They can do no wrong. They love luxurious things, even at the expense of you or whoever else. We know that they can't take criticism, but not only that, they don't have a sense of humor. They don't like to be like the butt of the jokes, even if you're like, joking around. They get really, 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 really upset and triggered by that, and they can become very aggressive and violent. And so there's a lot of characteristics. Of course, we know taking advantage of others, rules don't apply to them. A lot of them have a concept of boundaries. They don't feel that they have to apply to the same rules that everybody else have to apply, and that comes along with that grandiosity, the belief that they're above or special in some form of way. And then they're obsessed with people, and sometimes with their their appearance. So I mean, we just really have to learn how to recognize those characteristics. And my thing is, I always give the ladies or men the wheel of abuse, the cycles of abuse, so that they can start to understand and recognize like those characteristics. Like, it's not just physical, it's not just emotional, like it could be sexual, financial, and so forth. There are so many different forms of abuse. And one of the things that Camille brought up is them latching on to the family. And essentially what happens is the family becomes what they call in the narcissist world as flying monkeys, where they use the family to essentially, do the dirty work for them. They don't have to work as hard because they got the family doing the work for them and reporting to them and so forth.
Yeah. And I like what you said too about the cycle of abuse. And I want to just tell you guys about it because you keep mentioning it, and so there's 4 cycles of abuse. It's when first is when the tension's building, when you start seeing some of those signs you were discussing, all that stuff. The second is when the actual incident happens. So whether it's a verbal assault, physical assault, then there's the reconciliation phase where that love bombing comes in, and then there's the calm. And that calm could last for a while. So that narcissist, like you were talking about, will use that calm time to his advantage and, kind of sink his teeth even further in. So very interesting.
Absolutely. So anybody
I-
else?
I was gonna say too.
Go
I mean,
ahead.
going back to what you were talking about, like if you grew up with a narcissist, if you haven't healed from that, if you don't know what that was and recognize that, you're prone to almost normalize that type of behavior and how you were treated. So therefore, that makes you even more vulnerable, and that's what you'll attract.
Yeah, and not only that, it has a lot of different effects. And I can really break it down, because sometimes you can either be a really sensitive or passive type of person, or you can display narcissistic characteristics. And so sometimes, like, you pick up those characteristics, and then you start to devalue or put those characteristics into play with other individuals. And so like, that's something to think about as well.
For
Definitely.
sure. Especially if a child, you grew up in broken homes. I mean, even as females, now I can only speak from, my single female experience growing up without a father. I mean, once a man finds that out, that immediately makes you more vulnerable. You know what I mean? Because he knows, or he assumes that, all right, she might cherish my love a little bit more. She may be okay with the minimum because she don't know better, or she never seen that growing up. And that can again perpetuate those dynamics of power and control. So yeah, like you said, learning how to heal from that childhood trauma is crucial, because I feel like we are our inner child. So if we grew up with that, and haven't dealt with that, then we're either bound to repeat it or we can't recognize it when it happens. Or we become the perpetrator ourselves.
I think one of the biggest things for me was the sense of humor. Like I had an experience with, I'm not going to say the person's name, but with a narcissist, and what made me, because I knew that the emotional outbursts and the instability of mood, the fluctuation, in mood was a little, it was definitely noticeable. But what I did is I turned on a comedy. You know how is it iHeart or one of those radio station of series? And I turned on a comedy. Yes, I turned on a comedy station, and we had an hour drive. And do you know that I'm in the car crying? Okay, I'm laughing so hard. And do you know this person did not laugh at one joke? And I was like, I'm looking over like,
That's a red flag within itself.
It's okay. I was like, okay.
Like
so I was like, I guess I proved my theory, and then it's funny. It was funny now, but it was funny then, but it's definitely funny now. So yeah, there's characteristics to definitely beware and watch out for.
Yeah, those narcissists, man. Like even in my experience, like parts of his narcissism that impacted me the most was that everyone liked him. They're the most charming people. So you don't want to be the guy that like tries to burn his image or, be the whistleblower and ruin somebody's reputation. So, oh man, you can go on and on about that stuff.
And that's a dangerous spot to be in too, because it's like once you see that individual now, like their sights is on destroying you in any way possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really be careful, because the things that they would do, the lengths that they would go through to try to destroy or demean your character, it's no limit. It's no limit.
Yes.
My goodness. So before we go on to like anything else, like do anyone else want to share any childhood trauma and how it connected to any domestic violence situations that they have gone through?
And we talk about people just having different backgrounds, like being raised differently, and that impacting how they bring their relationships together. Like maybe, I don't know, for example, like religion, or just a 2-parent household and they're not used to being a 2-parent household. So roles don't get played properly. And that turns into verbal domestic violence. Sorry. I mean, can we talk about that?
Yeah, no, you brought up a good point though, because again, like for instance, I have a client and she's Jehovah's Witness, and that religion places heavy power and control on the man, where the man is the patriarch of the family. He's the provider. And again, these are the traditional norms of our society that some of us still follow now. But in saying that though, some religions, almost give the power to men inherently. So dealing with that from the gate and then bringing that into the relationship can have, oh my God, profound consequences, because now you're following that systemic structure, and it's all power and control, and that person's at the top, because of them following their religion and following what they believe is true. And that makes it even harder to speak up and tell them about themselves, because they are doing this as part of their religion,
And some of those same people, like they really just stick to the point of, oh, this is how I was raised, and this is how we handle things in our household and things like that, with no intent or wantonness to like break the cycle or end the cycle, even if it means like making your partner feel more comfortable, even if there is a different background or anything of that sort. So yeah. That's pure craziness. Domestic violence is one beast within itself.
Yeah.
There's one beast within itself. And like, wow, we just like haven't, it just randomly came across my mind about people who go through domestic violence and they have friends or they have peers or family members who experienced it as well. And we have people who are in very dangerous situations where literally their life is at stake. And one of the things I wonder about is, God bless you. God bless you. One of the things I've always wondered about is
Thank you.
the the right ways of getting involved without the possibility of getting yourself hurt or killed or anything like that. Because for whatever reason, I'm kind of addicted to Fatal Attraction. And don't judge me, the show Fatal Attraction, I'm kind of addicted to it. But it makes me wonder because some people are in these situations and some of us have a clue or idea that these people are going through these type of situations, and we really can't have that. Like, it's not, as much as we want to save them, we can't. The reality is that we can't in that time, because depending on what level of mental or emotional abuse that that person has experienced, there's a chance that you're putting yourself in a line of fire that is going to turn into gasoline and boom, pretty much soon. And I've seen stories and situations where people try to protect their family member or their friends, or have shown up where a person has in the middle of getting physically beaten or something like that, and they themselves end up battered or abused. And it's not just as simple as, oh girl, can you come get me right now, I'm coming right outside. It can very well turn into a car chase, because people are crazy. People are crazy. And I say all of that to say, because I just went on a tangent. It randomly came across my mind on the want and the need to save someone that you know who is actually going through this situation, and just feeling helpless that unless that person decides that they want to leave, or they decide when they had enough. Because the reality is, when you're experiencing a certain level of abuse, you don't leave until there has to be a final straw. And sometimes what you think may be that final straw for you is not for that person.
Mhm.
So it's sad that it has to get to that way, but I want to bring awareness on this, because we are losing our women behind this.
It's it's so many different directions we can go with this, because even with women or men who's in domestic violence relationship, a lot of times when there's children involved, they don't understand that there are certain roles that the children play that can potentially put them in danger. So a lot of times what parents tend to do is they tend to draw attention towards themselves to prevent the children from being, hurt or abused, or the child may be that child that tried to intervene, or you have the helper, that the one that sit and tried to help. So there's so many different roles that people that is exposed to DV that they play. And so I think maybe one day, maybe one day, I don't know, this month is approaching its end, but I feel like that's definitely something that we need to discuss as well. Um, but how do we help individuals, like you said, without inserting ourselves? We know that a lot of us have a mentality like, I'm gonna mind my business. She chose to be in that situation, she chose to be in that relationship, and all along this person could have been reaching out for help, and
Well,
and
probably
just
don't even know how to ask for help or even know that
exactly.
they can be helped. And the scary part about that, like my first instinct would be, oh, show up with the police. But if that person is going to go back to that person, there's a chance that it could go off very much worse, because they know that you have someone who was willing to go to the extent to get the police involved and report them. And and just like I said, I'm kind of borderline addicted to Fatal Attraction. Sometimes when stuff like that has happened, when they go back, they end up dead.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, I have like a list of statistics beside me. Like domestic violence murders make up 20% of all violent murders, you know? So they say to call the cops and stuff, but like you said, especially certain cultures of people, we already distrust cops, so that's not gonna matter. But it's also not gonna matter you trying to go play Captain Save and try and save that person, because they're still, even with both people, they're not ready to change. They still will go back. But the one difference is now you're putting your life in danger and trying to
Absolutely.
save yourself, and then you're gonna be mad because that girl's gonna go back or that man's gonna go back.
Absolutely.
But why are they going back? Like, is it a financial thing? Do they feel like they don't have? Because a lot of times, like we talked about the mental distortion, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't
Mhm.
have any supports. All of my supports have been isolated. I've been isolated from. I don't have anybody that's willing to help me. So how do we develop action plans that's going to help these individuals feel like they have the support that they need without, amplifying the trauma or the abuse or making
What
it
I
worse.
can say for me, because when I decided to leave that abusive relationship, everything, all those questions of what you just said was a very well the things of my thought and my thought process, and it made it hard for me to leave. And I started to mentally go back to my own pro and con list of what is it that I really have for myself over what she can really give me. Like I said, I just moved to Philly. So at that time, I just, established a life for myself. I was working. I was the one that was driving. She didn't have a car. She was barely keeping a job. So I'm like, well, okay, I know I'm not going back to Jersey, but if I decide to leave, I got to trust God that everything will be okay. And when I left, I never looked back. I had many experiences in between that once we start sharing our experiences, I'll like elaborate more on that. But just to address the questions that we do have, because they do come up, and I feel like a lot of people go through so many attempts to leave, but before you really leaving out of the door, you really decide to just pack up whatever it is that you could pack up in your car. But before you decide to come, somebody to come and pick you up, before you turn that doorknob, it's literally those questions or those demeaning remarks or that belittlement that you have
Mhm.
experienced with that person that come back to your head, and you start, oh, I can't go. Oh, what about the kids? Oh, I don't have any money. Or she would love to make me feel all types of ways when I didn't have any money. So I used to be bad. Well, I'm still working on it. Bad on budgeting and all that types of things. So when she knew I didn't have any money, those were the times where it's like, oh, I wouldn't have money, but she would have money, because like our pay schedule was like, 1 week this way, one week whatever. And she would you know, oh, you don't got nowhere to go, you don't got this, you don't got that. But the very day that I decided to leave, God is so good to me that I didn't get not one, but I got 2 deposits to my bank account, and I was out of there and never looked back. So
I like to say this too because I know sometimes we have situations where women is in a physical, situation, but then they leave that situation and then they enter into another relationship and it's more verbal. And so a lot of times people look at it like, okay, well, it's better than getting beat on, so they willing to take that form of abuse because it's not physical.
right.
Um, and so that's another reason why people get stuck in those type of abusive relationships. One thing that I was going to say, I feel, and this is just me, personally, I just feel like if you have if you experience any one of those characteristics on the wheel, the cycles of abuse, I feel like, I mean, I understand pros and cons. I feel like pros and cons when you making a business decision. Pros and cons when you making, a family, decision concerning your family.
Right.
But when you're in an abusive relationship, you focus on those cons. To me, I feel like the pros is non-existent. I mean, that's just
Mhm.
my opinion. And I
And the
feel like if
perfect
we
example for that, yeah, perfect
Mhm.
example for that, that you have people in relationships where like 28 days straight, everything, oh, it's so good, we were doing so well. And then day 29, what did I say, 28, whatever, day 29, day 30, then now they done destroyed your clothes, they bust your windows, they whatever. And the abuser will go back to, oh, well, those past 28 days, I've been treating you well. So this one day that I decided to bust your windows to put sugar in your tank, you should absolutely forgive me. And for me, it's like, once you can do so many good things, because but going back to the point what Jaquetta said, that once you leave one abusive relationship, sometimes after that relationship, you end up with another abuser, but in a different type of way. And in the experience in that, I forgot all of whatever I was about to say, got sidetracked, whatever. But maybe probably because I'm getting triggered. I don't know, but I got sidetracked
Can
with
I
that. But that was
can I
the,
interject?
yes, absolutely.
Because we touched on so many things, and I was like, I want to say something. I want to say something. Going back to shit, I lost my thought. Going back to what you were saying about, I lost it.
was it the pros and cons or focusing on the cons?
Focusing, no, going from one relationship to another. Thank you. I think the main thing for me getting out of mine, right, was not a pros and cons list, but more like, how much do you love yourself over the situation that you're in right now? How much do you see yourself completely changing? Who were you when you entered? Who are you now? How can you be the person you want to be if you're still in this relationship? Like, it was more of like a me question. It wasn't a what is this, what is going on, what am I going to lose, what am I going to gain from this? Like, it was like, how can I better myself? Because I'm a mom, and my first thing as a woman, as a mom, is to want to protect and nurture my children. So for me to be able to best protect them, I got to protect myself first. And every mom knows that. If you're not good, your kids are not going to be good. If you're good, your kids are great. So it's and that's what I was also saying. Going back to why they might go back to other situations, it's comfort. Because everybody would always say, Gab, why are you going back? Why are you going back? Was he doing much of anything?
No,
It's not that. It's more of a comfort for me. That's what it was. It was comfort.
was it comfort or was it familiarity?
Yeah, or
It
codependency.
was being comfortable with the bullshit. It was being like, okay, I rather, like you said, he's not physical, but he's verbal. It's that I'd rather deal with this here than go out and have to experience something else, and or open up. My thing is opening up. Once I open up to somebody, I feel like I gave you a lot. So I don't choose to open up very quick. I don't choose to open up early or quickly. So when I did and I went into that relationship, like, I'm gonna be open and we spent years together. After a while, that's just what you're used to, you know? But when it became being used to being comfortable over who I really want to be, it was no questions asked. And I can explain my experience when we start talking about experiences and stuff. But I definitely think that the thing is, for you to be able to change and not even go from a physical to a verbal, is to stop and sit and contemplate within yourself. Who do you want to be? It's all the me questions that every woman should ask themselves
And
going into any relationship.
and
Yeah.
you know
Can I
what?
just hit on?
You're
Oh, sorry.
fortunate. You are definitely fortunate to have that capacity. There's a lot of women who really don't have that mental capacity to be able to do that and really need, assistance. So, like I say, that's really fortunate that you were able to say, hey, I need to reflect on what's going on within me that's causing me to accept the things that I've been accepting.
It
Absolutely.
went back to my
Yes.
childhood.
Mhm.
It really did. It was like, let me take a seat. Let me sit down. What am I, continuing in this cycle? And then it also took with me listening to my grandmother's cycle and what she went through. And she didn't go through domestic violence like how me and my mom did, but she went through it on a different level. They were immigrants. They came here on in a different time. So she was raised a certain way and she lived her life a certain way that at 89, I tell you, that lady is miserable as hell. And I was like, wait a second, that's not going to be me. That can't
Yeah.
be me.
So
That can't.
I want to hit on the fact. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You did an awesome job describing trauma bonding. And I just want to hit on this before we go back because it's so crucial to talk about why people stay. So trauma bonding, so it occurs when a narcissist repeats a cycle of abuse with another person, but it fuels a need for validation and love from the person from being abused. So since there's that trauma bond, again, when you're in a domestic violence situation, you don't have an answer of why you stay or why you go back. It's not that clear,
Right.
and it goes back to this trauma bond where they keep repeating this cycle, but for some reason it's fueling a need for validation and love. So it's very toxic though. And I think identifying the cycle of that is crucial as well.
Very. Very much so.
Yeah, because those types of relationships, I mean, if you have a trauma bonding relationship,
Mhm.
and that relationship is pretty much just based on fear, control, and manipulation
And
compared
very
to safety
codependent.
and respect. Mhm.
Very codependent on each other. And I've seen it happen. I've more so seen it happen in more LGBTQIA plus relationships. Um, the trauma bonding in heterosexual relationships, not even to separate the two, but to really address the fact that some people don't think that like a certain class of people don't experience certain things when it can happen to anyone, male, female, them, they, he, she, anyone. It can happen to anyone. So when it comes to trauma bonding with, I would say, heterosexual relationships, I've seen a lot of those turn more so physical and controlling. Because there is a trauma bond, like you could be with a man who maybe has mommy issues and hasn't healed childhood trauma from whatever they experienced with their parent, whether they lost them very young or that mom used to abuse verbally or mentally abuse them, physically abuse them, mom was on drugs, you never know. And some men, or even just, let's just say people in a sense, some of us who trauma bond, I'm not gonna say us because I'm not putting myself in that, but most people I've seen who trauma bond are basically looking for people to heal or fill a void of whatever it is that they feel like they're not getting from whomever had caused that trauma.
Mhm. Yes. And sometimes that intense emotions can mirror love bombing as well. So
Mhm.
now, since we're in this trauma bonding relationship, even even the small stuff they do, we still get that love from and that validation. And we don't really know why. And that's the reason.
I feel like when you explain it like that, I feel like it has everything to do with knowing your worth. Because I feel like when you know your worth and you know what you're like dealing with and what you're not, like I'm way different than how I was, I would say like 5 or 6 years ago when I experienced that, where I would just like, basically probably not accept people for who they are. But now it's like within the first 5 or 10 minutes of a conversation, and I'm a person of energy. So if that energy isn't sitting right with me, or if my brain just goes to a different level of like not non-interest, then there's a chance. I had someone recently who I guess I got that like red flag from. It seemed like more so like a sales pitch oh, I do this and I do that, and I'm capable of loving this way, and I'm capable of this, and I'm not that. And I feel like when you first meet someone and you basically giving off a sales pitch of whom you can be in a relationship, it's kind of like a red flag for me, because if you don't really know, if we're just getting to know each other, which is why I feel like most people getting to know each other should be more so like friends before getting into a relationship, because the things that you say in a conversation can become different in a few weeks or so, and the actions start coming into play, and you start seeing things that's like, wait, that's the way that you said that you would handle the situation. It's the complete opposite, you know?
Yes. That's why, I always urge people to ask those difficult questions in the beginning. You should expect people are going to tell you what you want to hear when they're trying to get to know you, when they're trying to get to love up on you, whatever the case may be. Ask
I
those
do
tough
that.
questions. What's your weakness?
Yeah,
What's your
I
biggest
do that.
insecurity? And see how they respond to that. And then, gauge that instead of, oh, what do you do? And, the surface level stuff.
In my experience, more so now that I've gotten older, anybody that I decide to talk to, I do 21 questions. So in our 21 questions, we will ask whatever. Like, you can ask me what's my favorite color, or you can ask me what's my favorite sex position. You ask me your most important 21 questions, and I'm asked mine. And in that game, for lack of a better word, we're supposed to be completely honest. And it's not necessarily just honest with each other, honest with yourself. Like, if I ask you what's your 5-year goal, be honest with yourself. Answer that question with the complete honesty. And then you relay your answer to me. Because if you can answer 21 questions about yourself, then if we last 21 questions, you have me intellectually. I'm like, okay, this person can intellectually keep up a conversation. And then 2, that means you kind of know something about yourself. Not even something, you know about yourself.
Right.
And to be in a healthy relationship, you have to love yourself. That person has to love themselves. Come loved, come healed, come whatever you need. But it's not me carrying you, me having to figure out what you want or what you like in life, or none of that. Like, be yourself, be your best self, and I don't know, just be yourself. But you have to be able to answer 21 questions. And it's just, I think that's also another thing that women should be able to do. I saw that actually come across Instagram the other day, and I thought it was really funny. I was like, oh, now everybody's trying to be like more, they want to know. Let's figure it out. This is not just about, are you good in bed? Like, let's talk about some real ish here. And that's the only way you're going to be able to build a healthy relationship. Can you even have a conversation with your significant other?
Exactly.
Yes, it has to have a real foundation, because if not, that's when you make yourself more susceptible for being in a domestic violence relationship. If you only know the surface level stuff and don't really know or in tune with the other person's emotions, if they even have it. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Once you're strong on your boundaries and yourself and your worth, they don't even have the opportunity to take that from you, or like put you in that situation. When you own your ish, you're like you said, you'll see narcissism a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you really just try me? Like, you must not see my energy from here.
And just touching on that, when you know yourself and you come across a narcissist who want to tell you about yourself, but you already know yourself, that's a red flag to me in general. Like, I had someone tell me like, oh, I know that you're going to be like very successful, but I can see that you're going to marry a man one day.
That sounds like projecting.
That, and then what does that have to do with anything? Where did you even get?
Like, and it was, I can go deep into that whole, but I'm talking about the Looney Tunes, okay? And I've experienced plenty of Looney Tunes in my life, trying to stay away from them and everything, but you get to meet people who try to like tell you about yourself, like you don't know yourself and you haven't gone through at least at least know what you like, at least know what you dislike, at least know what your goals are, or anything like that. So no one can ever come along and tell you who you're going to be or what you're meant to be and how much potential that they see in you. I'm a dozen, thank you very much. You know?
And ask
So
somebody.
okay, and I feel like that's why I spent after that abusive relationship, I did continue to date, but I remained single. So, and I continued to date so I can like learn more about myself because I'm mainly by myself. As I'm healing, I don't really get to learn things about myself unless I'm really around other people or interacting with other people, or at least just mainly because of my own childhood trauma. Me continuing to date allow me to learn things about myself I didn't get installed in me as a child, to know that I am worthy, to know that I don't have to, deal with certain things, to have boundaries, to, hold myself to a certain level of honor, I guess. Because people will come along, and that's not even just relationships, it's people in general. You don't just encounter a narcissist in a relationship, you encounter them in general. They are out here in this world with the most prettiest mask on their face.
Yeah, and I like how what you guys were saying, because again, part of any action plan, once I guess we'll talk about that in a little bit, like once a victim does find help and stuff, I always tell them, let go and let God. Let go. You have to, when
Literally.
someone's ready, they have to be entirely ready to let go of the house he may be funding, that car, but even the material stuff that may make their lives comfortable. Let go of whatever's inside of ourselves that's making it so hard to walk away. Because at the end of the day, a perpetrator is filling some sort of need that we have, some sort of void. So we have to let go and assess that about ourselves. So the people in domestic violence relationships that jump relationship to relationship, they're not doing that healing. They're victims and they haven't really healed. Therefore, they repeat.
That reminded me of what I was thinking. So thank you again. I can remember times where we were talking about how to help people in situations and getting them out of their situations. I can remember times where me and him are going at it like crazy, and the neighbors are like, we're calling the cops, and we stop and we're like, don't worry about it. Don't call the cops. And then they're like, fine, we won't call the cops, and we'll go right back to arguing and fighting. Like, when you know you're done, you know you're done. Because you can say it over and over a span of 8 years. Took 8 years for me to be like, all right, I gotta take a step back. And all the people, all of my family, all of my friends, all of my coworkers, all the jobs I've lost, the cars I've lost, like everything. And you don't realize it until you have the hindsight of walking away. But what I say to people that are like, Gab, I'm so proud of you. I can't believe you did it. I'm like, did what? What I needed to do?
Yeah.
What I needed to do? Okay,
And
thanks.
I
I
feel like
appreciate it.
I feel like we should touch on that too. Like, when did you know that, like, what was the final straw? And I guess you just share that for yourself, but I wonder if anybody have another final straw to share, just to give different examples of experiences that they have encountered. And I'm so glad to see Tiffany unmute her mic. Hey girl.
The final straw for me, it was so crazy because I questioned myself even in the final straw. I was married for 12 years and I had went through financial abuse, manipulation abuse, and a lot of things that I just pretty much just ignored because things were still being soothed in the house. So it's like, because my husband wasn't like a monster or like like vocal with certain things, it still was, I was still being financially abused with him not being responsible. However, the final straw for me was it was cheating. It was no more compassion, no more apologies for anything, just not caring about anything anymore. So for me, that was like the final straw. And what I questioned myself about was, I said, well, dang, like I dealt with all these other things for all these years, but as soon as when my ego was hit, like feeling like, so you're not, because you're not going to soothe me anymore or show me any type of compassion, that's the last straw for me. So if he didn't do that, I wonder how long will I still have stayed. So I still
Had he
question,
been
like
like,
sometimes
oh
I
baby,
still
please
question
don't
it.
go.
Huh?
Had he been like, oh baby, please don't go, you think you would have stayed?
No. I honestly thought that, in my mind, I honestly thought that maybe he wanted me to leave, but just didn't know how to tell me, because it was just one of those things where he just didn't care anymore. And that's what was the bottom line for me. So why wasn't all the other red flags and all these other things never? Well, it kind of was, because I think I probably wanted to have a divorce each year of our marriage. But it was just one of those, it just was like, once I felt like I wasn't being loved anymore at all. So even in this toxic relationship, it did get to a point where I just wasn't feeling love. And that's when it was time for me to go. That was the final draw for me.
Yeah, Jaquetta has to go now.
Yeah,
But
I didn't
thank
want
you
to
so much
interrupt.
for joining us.
Well, it was
And
definitely
yeah,
a pleasure
for
speaking
all
with
the gems you have dropped today.
you.
You are so
Thank you.
appreciated.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Pleasure
See you
meeting you.
guys next time. I'm
Yeah.
hoping we can have a part 2 discussion. There's so much to
I feel
cover.
like we should, because it's so much to talk about and cover when it comes to domestic violence.
Yeah, definitely.
Not even to mention when it comes to domestic violence in men. So hopefully next time we can get some men to join us and talk about that reality, because people don't think that men go through it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
See you soon.
see you soon.
Bye.
So I would say for my no, I'm not even gonna say for people who are my friend on Facebook, they see me share a few times like my experience with domestic violence, and the actual picture that I share was my final straw, where she burned me on my face with an iron. Like literally tag a scalding hot iron, tagged my body, my face, my legs, my arms, my all of that. And just me leaving was a 3-day process. Mainly because it went back to the financial abuse. I don't think I had any money that day, but I think the next day was when I got those deposits. And then the following day, after she burnt me on my face, and I believe that's how me and Tiffany started talking for real. When after she burnt me on my face with the iron, I went to work, burnt face, blistering and all, looking like Angela Bassett and waiting to exhale like she caught blowback from the fire when she lit that car on fire. That's exactly how I seriously, that's exactly how I went to work. And what's crazy is that well, she's still there, but where I used to work, my job was separate from their job. So I was separate from them. But just so happened on this day, my computer wasn't working and I had to sit actually out in the floor with them. So I'm sitting there at my computer just like, I'm gonna act like ain't nothing, whatever. I'm just gonna get through my day. I still got written up that day, but I'm gonna go through whatever. And I think that's when me and Tiffany really started talking like that or whatever. But I had those thoughts on, like, not having any money, not having any family, not having nowhere to go. I spent 2 weeks in a hotel before one of my friends was like, no, you can't do this. Come with me. And sometimes that's just the reality of the process of leaving the situation. And one thing I will say that, like, it gets hard, but it gets so much better on the flip side. So much great stuff can come out of, turning your trials into triumph and just conquering everything that anyone who came across your path that was meant to come kill and destroy or take away from you. And I feel like most people who end up in abusive situations is because that you are called to this world for a greater purpose, and God is using you for that purpose. And it's really up to you to just step up and show out. And me personally, I call myself I'm a soldier for the Lord, and I'm okay with doing anything and everything that I'm doing, as long as I'm living in my purpose. And I feel like I wouldn't have gone through the things I have gone through if there wasn't a certain purpose behind it, you know? So, yeah. So, I guess we kind of, like, covered all topics and everything, outside of the action plan, which is what we're going to get into next. Because, and I really wanted Joella to touch on this, because we can talk about what we did as far as our exit strategy, but I feel like for anyone who's watching or who would possibly watch this video and may think to themselves, or who probably is quietly going through this situation and probably want to get out but don't know how. So I wanted Joella, can you, like, what would you tell a client who want to leave, have the means to leave, and just don't know where to start?
Yeah. Well, first it starts with, again, talking about what's going on internally that's fueling that comfortability, that's fueling that desire for that relationship. And I think it's two different things when you're talking to somebody who has the means to leave and someone who doesn't.
Well, that's what I mean. The means, as far as, like, they already made up in their mind. Now, I don't mean like financially. Financially, great, but for the most part, most people who are in abusive situations don't have the money or have the resources to leave.
Mm-hmm. Well, because that's like the biggest barrier to people like staying. And even in my experience, like, again, I let it progress so far because I was financially unstable. I didn't want to be uncomfortable. I didn't want to face the reality of, like, having the couch serve. It was a very uncomfortable thought for me. But, and again, I think that's something to talk about too, like the shame of, like, when you were talking about your experience, like allowing it to get that far, when we did finally get help, there's an incredible amount of shame, and that shame is what prevents people from getting help too.
Right.
But it starts with, like, financials. You have to be financially ready to leave, especially if you don't want to go through the shelter system and the safe havens, and you don't want to seek out that support, and you still are really inclusive and stuff like that. Definitely collecting your important documents, starting saving money through, like, another bank account or like a stash or something like that. Changing all your password. You have to do the little stuff to really prepare. And people find that once you do start doing that stuff, it motivates you to actually pack up your things and go. Like changing your password, reaching out to people that you may have isolated from, those supports, and being honest, contacting advocates and stuff like that. What else? Really just focusing on problem solving. If you know that you have to be with him because he takes you to work every day with your car, all right, how else are you going to work? How do I figure that out one problem at a time? Because he or she is enabling something and making it comfortable for you. So now you have to problem solve to say, hey, how can I do this independently?
And that's where one thing I wanted to say about the pattern is that one of the things for me when I decided that I was leaving, one of the things that was to my advantage was the fact that it was my car, not hers. When me and you beefing, for a fact you're not getting a ride to work. Nope, get on that sector. So one morning, the second day after she burnt me and everything, I packed up literally anything that I can just take up in my car, and I left out as if I was going to work. Came back because I already booked my hotel room. Came back to get the rest of my stuff because if at that time I lived in Mount Airy, Germantown, but she worked in South Philly. So if you're riding on a bus, that's probably about an hour or so, whatever, ride. So I had a time span to like know what time she was going to be home and things like that. And I like to think of it as a defense offense type of thing. Whereas if this person is a narcissist, whereas on her, on a nameless person's behalf, she had a certain pattern about her. She truly believed that she knew me better than I knew myself. She truly believed that she knew all the things that I was going to do, the things that I was going to be thinking before I can even do it. And once I owned that for myself, the little things I did start doing. I did start changing my passwords, but that was mainly because like she started doing petty stuff, like going around she would do petty stuff. She would vandalize my car. She would do a whole bunch of like other things. Like, so the second day I packed my stuff up, went to that hotel. And the last day I was there. I guess the second day that I packed all my stuff, she realized that I was coming to the house when she wasn't there and taking my stuff, because I haven't been home, nor have I had any contact with her and everything. And then for some things, and I'm just going to say for anybody who's experiencing domestic violence and considering leaving, a lot of things are material. You can get those things back. I'm willing to lose, walk out the door without that 75-inch, without a game system, even sometimes without my clothes, okay? And it would just so happen at that time my clothes was already in totes. So I'm even willing to leave out with whatever. When it comes to my peace, anything can go. Anybody can get it, everything has to go. And some people, I feel like some people are part of that like planning to leave process. They start to analyze the things that they do and don't have, and how I'm going to move this and how I'm going to get that, and make it more complicated to what it is. And their anxiety is so high, and that person that they're with knows them so much that they start to suspect that something is up. So now you put yourself in another situation, because you get people who get to the point where it's like, well, if I can't have you, no one else will. And they'll probably start watching you more. So you have to be very calculated in the things that you do and how you react and how you respond. Even if you start moving things slowly but surely, even if you only going to take a bag full of clothes, you already got your job, you already got your car, you just need to get out the situation. Get out the situation.
Well, yes. And you know, it's there's so many ways, but really our safety is vital and is essential to any type of plan we make. We need to know
Absolutely.
where to go if something goes down. We need to have a plan for the kids. Where are they going? If I have to go to the hospital or seek help, you know, we have to ensure our safety. Like you were saying, we can do all the small stuff too, but if that is gonna impact our safety, and that
Right.
we can't do that so much. You know, we can't start
Mhm.
packing and slowly moving things because there's a risk to our safety. So
And for some people, I
personal
would
safety
say,
plan.
if you do have a friend, some of us do, because at that time I did have a friend who listened to my stuff every time. And, when I needed to like vent about how I'm going to do this or how I'm going to do that, and starting to plan out like my leaving process, I will advise for anyone who's doing this, do not text this. If your significant other goes through your phone, do not text anyone your plans on leaving. Always have a face-to-face conversation or have an over-the-phone conversation. However it needs to go, depending on how controlling that the person is, you got to learn how to, if I knew that I was going to do something and just as well as my partner think that they knew me, I knew them. So I knew that if I reacted or responded in a certain type of way, they would react maybe in a higher frequency level than I probably would, but I know that there's going to be a reaction. So you have to be prepared for whatever that reaction is or what it looks like, and do what's necessary for yourself to move out of there. Get yourself out of there.
Yes.
Sometimes restraining, or you can get a restraining order, report it to the police as much as possible. Document everything. Document when you get abused, document your bruises, even if you probably don't plan on pressing charges. You never know what type of documents you may need in the future. God forbid, like I say, with these fatal attraction shows, if you are like reporting it to the police, if you are documenting your abuse and things like that, it's easier to pinpoint if, God forbid, this person decide, oh, you're not leaving.
Yes. Even small stuff like having a code. Like I remember like when I was in my situation, like even when it was like before it got to the physical part, I would text my friend just like a code. Like I'd be like monkey. And like she would just know like she's not okay right now. You know, even
Right.
something small like that. What else? Like backing into your driveway instead of pulling in. That way, if you need to escape, it's faster. Having an extra car key because they often like to take your keys and your ID,
Absolutely,
like
girl.
that. So making sure you do that.
Especially when they don't got a car, they want you, they want all your privacy.
Well, they're gonna try and isolate you as much as you can. So you gotta have double everything, double house keys, double car keys. Like you have to document. You have to even journal. You know, if you guys, if he's rattling off insults or threats and stuff like that, and you can't take a picture of it, journal it, write that it happened. Because especially with narcissism, what they'll say to you is, "I didn't say that."
Right. Or
So you
record
need
them.
that.
Silent, you can even silently record them and like send it to somebody, send it to whatever. And even if, because some of us have that friend that knows that even though they know that you're being abused, but I'm not going to judge you. And anything that you feel as though you need to do to make yourself feel safe, do what's necessary. However, I will make these suggestions in the meantime, just so you can protect yourself. You know,
Yes. And
it's
especially when
bad.
you do reach that point of leaving, like we always advise them to have as least contact as possible. Like you don't want to tell him, all right, I'm leaving on Friday. Like, no, you need to just go because like it's gonna
Never.
threaten your
And
safety.
my best suggestion is that you never give a warning. Never give a warning, because even if, okay, because it's hard to just say, oh, all abusive people are narcissists, but whatever. You know, that sense of needing control, that manipulation, that jealousy, that, oh, all of that can come crashing down on a person, and it can definitely turn to a heat of the moment situation. And the key to everything is to make sure that your safety is first. And even if that means whoever that you confide in the most, make sure that they have your location. Location. Look, I do not mind sharing my location for people that I know who will pull up about me. Right, guys?
Even letting the people know, like for instance, like the biggest thing with domestic violence that we see is that the schedules. You know, if you're a victim, you have to let people know, even people at your job. Like if your perpetrator knows you work 9 to 5 and you're gonna be at Giant for 8 hours of these days working, you might have to speak up and say, hey, this guy can't come here. Or, you know, you might have to advocate for that because they do know your schedule. They do know that kind of stuff.
Right.
I've had to do that on job too. I just told the security guard at my job, like, look, he might come here acting crazy. Don't let that man in here. Or if you see him, whatever, call my extension because I'll come down and handle it. I don't need no scenes or nothing. Like, you just gotta do what you gotta do to protect yourself at the end of the day. Even in the house, you know, just do what it takes to make sure that you're gonna be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like we're basically touching on it now. It's a little half hour before, but I feel like we basically touched on everything. And for anyone that's experiencing domestic violence situation, we do have community resources listed on our website to help people. You can always reach out to us at the organization. If you just need someone to talk to, Joella is accepting clients, of course, but we want people to feel as safe as possible. So as we close out, I just want to ask if there any advice or final words to anyone who could be possibly watching right now or possibly would watch and hasn't either accepted the fact that there's an abusive situation, or is ready to leave and haven't said anything. Suffering in silence is what I like to call it.
I would say start planning. Because even, like I said, even making the small stuff, and even like Tiffany was saying, you think about this stuff when you're still in the relationship with somebody. Like you could be thinking about divorce and stuff when you're still in it with some people. So that's part of planning. It's just the follow through, you know. And yeah.
I say love yourself. Once you love yourself, anybody's gonna love you. And I think that's a big thing with women and men and anybody in domestic violence. You don't truly love yourself if you're sitting in that situation. And that might sound cruel and that might sound real hard. But if you did love yourself, even a little bit, you're not going to let yourself go through that situation, you know? So if you put some worth on your name and put some respect on yourself, then you will find the means and the will and the want and the way to get out of it. And it's not going to seem as hard because you know that you deserve better.
Absolutely.
And once that happens, everything else, life is great. Life is only great when you don't allow it to be great or you don't make it great. So if you are in any situation where you don't feel like, wow, life is great, figure out how to change that situation and you'll see that it is.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say too, do not stay for the kids. We see this so often where you will put up some stuff because you have this value of this 2-parent household and you want the family together, you know, abandon all that because that's not a reason to put up with mistreatment.
That is that's a conversation for another time that I definitely need to be involved in because I believe that is a generational cycle. It's not staying for the kids when you can't even be there for your kids. You were in the hospital beat the hell up because you didn't want to do what you needed to do for him. And now your kids is going to school or they walking or they whatever. You're not being there for the kids. You being there for yourself.
Or even thinking that, oh, he's just abusing me. He's not abusing the kids. He wouldn't treat the kids this way and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is and I would just say to my kings, even if they are not in a relationship, and I'm only speaking to kings who are not in a relationship with the mother of their child, but understand the value of her mental health, and that's necessary. And I'm also saying this to women who are experiencing this and can't like weigh out the balance of being in a relationship for the kids or choosing yourself. Because the reality is if you're not protecting yourself, that you can't protect your kids. And the more that your children see you going through these things, they're going through their own childhood trauma and turmoils. And like, this is how they learn how to develop relationships. This is how they learn how to treat people. And people think that their kids don't hear or they don't know. Kids are so smart. Not only are they so smart, their sensory levels are on 1,000, especially when it comes to, if anybody, their mother. Their sensory levels are on 1,000. So if you feel like they don't know, they do. And you're not helping anyone by saying. Was that an amen from the baby? That's my baby.
He in here like, what is going on?
Shows on YouTube.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I watch YouTube?
Go ahead, G.
I watch it.
Go ahead, G.
Tiffany, any final words for any women that's going through domestic violence or thinking about leaving or scared to leave?
Yes. One of the things is that's very important for me, that I do want to share is our pride. Sometimes we become prideful of, we want to stay in the situation because we worry about what other people say or scared to ask for help. You know, as women, I know it's not easy when you have children and you have to try to get away from the situation that you're in, if you can ask somebody, if you know that somebody will help you, if you need the help, reach out to that person and get that help that you need.
Absolutely.
And don't look at the help. Like sometimes we have a vision of what the help should look like, and it might not look like that, but if it's able to take you to the next level of leaving a bad situation that is not good for you or your children, you definitely need to set your pride to the side.
Pride is a good one. Because I think pride is really why now you said it, it plays a part in why I even stayed. Because everybody's gonna sit there and be like, oh, y'all are bad for each other. He's gonna hurt you, he's gonna do this, he's gonna do that. And yes, they were right. They were telling me all the things that was right in my face. But no, because I'm gonna show you why it's not gonna work, why it is gonna work. And I'm gonna show you why we are gonna be this powerful couple, and why just because he beating my ass right now, in 6 months he's not going to, he's gonna marry me. I'm gonna show you that, because that's my prideful side. Put your pride to the side, girl. It's not gonna work.
Mm-hmm. And just because he said it won't happen again, I'm not going to say that most men end up beating up somebody, and they may have put themselves in a situation where, oh my God, I hurt that person so bad, I never want anybody to experience that again, and they never do it again. But then you have those who don't have daughters, you know, who don't realize that what they're doing to this woman that they say that they're with, that one day this can very so happen to your daughter. Karma is real. Karma is real.
Also, a man that is overreacting, that is aggressive, that wants to put their hands on you or speak to you in a disrespectful way, that's not decent. That's not love. That's not, oh my God, he cared for me so much. He crazy.
That's not a man.
We like to call them Looney Tunes.
Yeah, you need to pull back and evaluate the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Anyone who loves and respect and value you, they're going to make you feel seen. They're going to make you feel heard. They're going to make you feel appreciated. They're going to make you feel like the queen or the king that you are. There's going to be an equally yoked situation. The communication doesn't have to result in a yelling and screaming match. You know, that's not effective communication. You know, beating up somebody one day or talking to somebody one day and then buying them gifts the next day, it's not love. It's still verbal and emotional abuse. It's narcissism. Please educate yourselves on narcissists. And if you are a decent person, there's a chance that they could be lurking for you, but they probably won't try you. They don't try strong people. They don't try people who have a mind for themselves. They don't try people who they know, they would consider us as alpha females. So they're not going to try alpha female, let's just say, you know, more so as to somebody who's probably in a situation where they need someone or needed to be rescued. I believe there's a term for that. Where someone basically save someone from whatever bad situation that they were in just to get with them, and then start treating them even worse.
Bad situation.
Even worse than where you just even came out of. And the most thing they like to say is, oh, this ain't nothing compared to what's your past. As a matter of fact, it's worse. Worse than what I've ever experienced. And, you know, people don't realize just because things are not physical doesn't mean it's not real. Absolutely. Mental health, you cannot see unless someone has a legit mental illness and you are aware of mental illnesses and mental health in your own. Like me, instantly, by having a conversation with someone, I can tell when someone is going through a bad situation, or I can tell when someone is like, whatever, I guess just because I'm an energy person. But ladies, don't settle. Men don't settle. Because I really want to touch on men and how
and all things that come together, and all things when it pertains to relationship, everything is not always perfect. But I will say that for single women and single men, that are wanting to be in relationships, I think that you should know why you need and want this person in your life. If you
Right.
don't know why, or if you don't know why you need, then you probably should reevaluate yourself, because sometimes the abuse that we do is accept has something to do with us internally and how we feel about ourselves.
Absolutely.
And your why and your need for the person that you vision in your life, if the person that you're seeing or dating that's in your life and they don't have any of it, I mean, because I know sometimes we can go on, we can have a fantasy, we can have a whole list, but you should have an idea of what it's like to be loved or even liked or tolerated or what, like those are the first things that are the first signs. um
Yeah.
so just keep in mind of those things when we out here in the world meeting people and we're
Yeah.
older now.
Yeah. And we don't got to be that little scared kid no more who afraid to speak up and, you
And there are a
know,
lot of grown women and grown men that have mental illness as well.
mhm, that they don't acknowledge, probably don't
They don't
treat, or probably
acknowledge.
have an idea that they do have it and
And
whatever.
no, you
You
don't have
know,
to be their doctor and try to fix them neither. That's not what I'm saying.
Not to fix it.
If that person is crazy and got their own issues, then you probably should go the other way. Don't try to fix it.
Yeah. You can't fix it. And it's not your job to fix it. Your
It's
responsibility
definitely
is yourself. You cannot save someone. I mean, you can save someone from homelessness, yes. You can buy somebody a couple of outfits and, you know, help them get on their feet and like start, you know, getting their life together and things like that. But if someone is just a bad person, you cannot change that. There's no, oh well, this person only do like these bad things from time to time, but overall I don't think that they're really a bad person. They just got messed up ways. We hear that a lot, but that's not an excuse to accept the things that you accept, especially when you know that you're worth so much more. And granted, if you feel like you are worthy of someone who you feel like just have a couple of bad days, some of us can handle it more than most. But to me,
right.
communication is key. And if you're having a bad day, you're not going to abuse me because, or mentally abuse me because you're having a bad day. That's unacceptable to me. Yeah. So any final thoughts before I really appreciate you ladies jumping on, having this conversation and, you know, helping us bring awareness to domestic violence and just the situation in general, because there are a lot of people who suffer in silence. And my general goal is to reach people who do suffer in silence, because I was one of those people who wouldn't reach out for help. And a lot of people who suffer in silence is mainly because they can't find someone to identify with their situation, or they don't talk about it enough, or someone else isn't talking about their situation. So they don't really feel like it's okay, or they don't feel like anyone else has ever gone through and then anything has even gotten better. People look at me sometimes and still wonder like how I can even do it. And I'm willing to educate and tell anyone how to go from just this mental, emotional, traumatic person to just start living in your purpose and becoming unapologetically yourself and creating boundaries and, you know, dealing with people in a way that is suitable for you and your peace, because that's really important. And one of the things, like Gabrielle said, I don't want to be 89 years old and miserable. I want to be 89 looking back at my life. I want to be one of those old people who just say whatever on my mind because I live my life. And you can feel a type of way, but what you can't say is that I'm lying. And most older people who are like that, they live their best life. You know, they have wisdom for you. You know, I want to be able to give wisdom into the world. We're not meant to just be here and just exist. You know, you got to live. And living isn't staying in a situation that constantly puts you down, constantly make you question your self-worth, makes you feel like no one else will love you but that person. That's absolutely untrue. Just like Ariel said, once you start to love yourself, everybody loves you. You have people who love you, and that person that you're with may make you believe that no one loves you, but I guarantee you there are people around you who absolutely love you, want to see you well, and will definitely help you if you are experiencing this situation. You can even call me. Okay, I only do what I can. I ain't going to say I'm gonna open up a hotline for whatever. I can only do what I can, to be honest. And it goes back to the earlier conversation of wanting to help people who are experiencing these situations without putting without putting myself in a situation where I could potentially be hurt or killed. Because it goes there. It does. So that's my wrap up. Unless anybody had any final words, we're on our last 10 minutes.
Yes, no,
I
this
feel
was
like this
great.
was a great conversation. I'm very much open and willing for a round 2 of a conversation. I guess we'll talk about it separately because you guys know I'm going on vacation. But it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but domestic violence happens every month. So we can even do this again next month, or even for our next Home for the Holidays event, and throw this in there as far as domestic violence, touching on it, because a lot of our childhood trauma is surrounded by domestic violence.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, ladies, I hope you have a great Sunday. Thank you for spending this Sunday with me. You were amazing. Remind me to buy you guys flowers.
Oh, you can send it to
Groupon. No, I'm playing.
Yes, you know where I live. But,
Right.
yes, it was good.
Good night.
Good
Bye,
night,
ladies.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
That shirt scared me at first. I said, who is that? Bye.